Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Shakran,
My name's Eli.
and today we are going to be talking about how our cultural norms impacted the COVID response. Now, you really can use this discussion to talk about how cultural norms impact any type of stressors in the community, but we really want to talk about the COVID response because that's what's impacting us right now.
And more specifically, we're going to be looking at different cultures and how they value individualistic versus communal norms.
Yeah, and first I really want to talk about what like a culture is. So a person's culture is based on where you live. It's just a set of traditions and beliefs you hold within that community.
Say word?
Yeah. Now, what the pandemic I think really did was kind of showed us what we valued as a community, and
Yeah. Especially in the first couple months, you kind of see what country valued what in their COVID responses. And I don't know about you, but I would have loved to have some free rent.
me too. But we're not saying that like just because this is what you value, like this is the right or wrong value. But we're just trying to have a discussion about what different countries around the world valued and how that just kind of impacted stressors like the COVID response. And also, I just want to like make it clear that at the end of the day, if you're in one of these communities, it doesn't mean that this is like what you value. Like there are variances. People value different things than the culture they live in. Like that's normal.
Yeah, that's a fact. And there's pros and cons to whatever cultures in that are around the world.
Yeah, and specifically, as Eli mentioned before, we're going to discuss countries with like more of an individualistic versus communal sense of culture. So in an individualistic culture, people like value individual rights, freedoms, and autonomy. And they're motivated by just like personal rewards. And in like a collective or more of a communal society, you're more willing to give up some of like your own like rights, just like if it's gonna like benefit the whole. So you are more willing to sacrifice your own interest a little bit. And the interesting thing about these communities, once you look at it, and again, it's not for all all these communities, but the ones that I've looked at, is that cultures that have high power gaps seems to be a bit more communal, and the cultures that have like a low power gap seems to be more individualistic, which makes sense because they vie for those individual rights and those freedoms.
Yeah.
And in low power gap countries, like you can think about like America and the UK, and the high power gap country, you can think of like India, China, Saudi Arabia. And what's interesting is that in these individual countries, leaders have to balance kind of the collective and individual benefits given. And again, like the best example of an individualistic country is America. We are one of the most individual countries.
Yeah, actually, we're the number one individualistic country in the world, and we love that American dream.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And we pride ourselves on values of our individual rights and freedoms that we have, and we protest, like a big thing is like if things are infringing on our rights, we're gonna protest about it. That's just a common thing here. And like we can see that now, like with the mask mandates and stay-at-home orders and things like that. Like people are like, hey, this is infringing on my individual rights, so I'm gonna go protest because like at the end of the day, like these are my rights are taken away. Of course, these things were being politicized. These things are being politicized at the end of the day. Like when you like go back and look at these individualistic countries, something we talked about how in individualistic countries, like they're low power gaps, and also in these communities, we more tend to listen to our peers than the people that are up above us, and there's like a general distrust of the government.
Really?
I would say like because I mean think about it here, like a lot of people are just kind of like they're taking on my freedoms, which
Yeah, that's true. That's
Which-
true.
which-
And you can tell in the different regions, like who trusts whom and why and stuff like that.
yeah, it's a bit. I mean, it is a big country,
Yeah.
and like and one thing that I really saw the COVID response that was interesting is a lot of people like were like, hey, it's not real, even though it's a worldwide thing. Like you see it everywhere. And they're just kind of like, it's not a thing.
Yeah.
It's not impacting me. Why are my rights being taken away? And which kind of just falls into line with just that those cultural norms and those perspectives that we were just talking
And if I could just add to that real quick, being in an individualistic society in the world, like yes, like Shakran was saying, it does drive innovation. It does drive kind of growth in the nation. That's why we get some of the like iPhones and Teslas and stuff like that. Like that's good things, right? But it complicates it when the collective has a goal, which is when you throw in mask mandates, social distancing. And so if you don't have people who are collectively agreeing to these goals, that makes it much more difficult to accomplish them.
Yeah, I would agree, and then we're going to talk about some of these examples of these countries, and we're going to see what you just said.
Exactly. So if we zoom in just a little bit, right, and we compare the U.S. versus India, just for a quick second, in a broad scope. The U.S. has 330 million people. We know this. Now, COVID-wise right now, 23,550,000 people have cases right now. But again, like I said, we have 330,000 people. Yeah. But if you look at a place like India, bro, they have 1.36 people in that place. But they have 10 million less COVID cases than ours. Now, to Shakran's point, there was a caste system there, and the power growth and poverty growth is much wider than it is in ours. But they are more willing to kind of like say, okay, I want to listen to the government, and we can kind of follow and agree to these COVID mandates just to get better numbers, right? And if we just zoom into America a little bit more, we can see that, according to studies, 11 states with mask mandates, cases fell 25%, right? Now, if you look at states that didn't follow it so much, there were 16 of them that just recommended it. So they were like, you have those 11 states that like, don't take this off, right? Then you had 16 that was like, think about it. Yeah. And in those 16 states, guess how many percent COVID raises rose?
Gonna assume over 50?
Bro, 84%. So you were right, yeah. By 84%. Yeah. And so when you have this massive goal of trying to shut down the country, or at least trying to social distance, wear masks, stuff like that, and not spread this virus, individualism kind of causes that problem. If you even look a little bit further, last year with our responses, you remember the CARES Act?
Yeah.
And you remember what that gave us, right? Yeah. The stimulus check, right? And if you were in the right tax bracket, you got $1,200 and you got some money for your kids as well, right? And if you were a small business, you got some PPP loan money, whatever, and that lasted for about 4 to 5 months. Now you look at a place like France that is a bit less individualistic than we are. And check this out. Some of the things that they did, right? They expanded health insurance for the sick and caregivers, right? They extended unemployment much longer than we did, postponed rent, bro, and utilities and utility payments for affected businesses. So you can see that in moments like these, when a collective needs to handle an issue, handle a pandemic or something like that, we need to get together, then it seems to be, if you are a little bit more communal, then you get to solve the problem a bit quicker.
I think it also just goes back to the point that, like, at the end of the day, like, at least in the U.S., like, in being individualistic and having like a state and a federal government, like, the messaging just wasn't the same across the board, you know? And because, even those leaders at the end of the day had different opinions about these things.
That's a fact. And to your point, that's why we only had 2 stimulus checks.
No, definitely. And like, and then like going back to the whole power gap, that thing, like when you have less of a power gap, like in countries like America, then like those leaders do have to think about those individual and collective benefits, both of them. But like also at the end of the day, I really do think just like us having such diverse like thoughts on how to handle this issue at the state level also just kind of like show the other cases rising, because America is a big country.
Yeah.
And I think like once you look at collective countries, like the one that I'm thinking about, the one that I'm looking at was Taiwan. For those of you that don't know, Taiwan had one of the most successful COVID responses. They had I think 200 straight days without COVID infection, which ended like October 30th. I think they had like 7 deaths. It might be more by now. Like last time I looked at it.
I was about to say.
I remember.
200 straight days.
Yeah, and guess what their population was?
What?
23 million people.
God.
Yeah. And just to talk about population density, in America, it's about, 92.9 residents per square mile? And in Taiwan, it's about 1,680 people per square mile. So, like, it's an urbanized area, and, there's people, it's not like, they're like, like 20 feet, or like, they're
people really
close,
compact in those cities and stuff like that.
Their response is better overall. And
so what you're saying is they collectively agreed to, like, wear the mask, socially distance, and because of that, for 200 straight days.
Well, I think their response was faster, and they just tested more frequently. Like if you think about America, like testing was expensive.
It was.
Like I think like rapid testing was expensive. It cost like $80 to like get it.
Really?
And at least it was for me. I remember I had to go pay for it. And if you did the other test, which took like 4 days to get to you, so like it was just kind of like that latency like really like hurt a lot of people.
Okay.
Yeah. But like. let us know what you think. Where do you live? Like, I mean, do you agree with what we said? If not, let us know. We'd really
Yeah.
like to hear your opinions and your thoughts. And what type of community did you live in? If you're someone that lives outside America, we would really love to hear from you.
Yeah, and does your COVID response match your cultural norms, or didn't it? Were you expecting better? Were you expecting worse? Was it right on time? Are you having free rent? Let us know in the comments below.
All right, we'll catch y'all later. Thank you for checking our video.
All right, have a great day.